Hey everybody, this is Gabe Hernandez with Comical Opinions. I'm back talking about IDW today. It always seems like I keep getting news articles that cross my path related to changes and moves that are going on with IDW, and it's sort of fascinating to see these developments or this evolution of whatever IDW is becoming in real time. I don't see a lot of people talking about it, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, but I find it interesting that to have so much kind of besides maybe DC Comics at this point, to see so many changes going on with IDW that kind of play out their strategy and just from an information and just an interest or curiosity point of view to see where that takes them. So this news came out yesterday related to IDW's hiring and expansion of their executive team. You have, and I'll talk about each one of these a little bit, and I think why this plays into a bigger picture of IDW strategy that I talked about in a prior video. You have Blake Kobashigawa, and I apologize for saying that incorrectly, was named Vice President of Sales for the publishing arm. Joseph Hughes is promoted to Director of Creative Affairs for the IDW Entertainment arm, and they're different for obvious reasons. And Marissa Stoddard elevated to Manager of Creative Affairs for IDW. Now, if we remember back into one of my prior videos, I talked about what IDW was doing. Is when you look at their financial report, and I just happen to have their investor report up here, talking about in this report, which is different than previous PowerPoint, is talking about their financial health and viability as of, and this report was published as of this past June. The financial takeaways here, which is kind of the key section here, is the increase in consolidated revenue was driven primarily by delivery of IDWE's Lock and Key Season 1 episode. So that's taking their Lock and Key comic written by Joe Hill, who is the son of Stephen King, and translated that into a Netflix show. Season 1 was released and did fairly well, and they just announced that Season 2, I believe, is going to start filming here in about 2 weeks. And IDW pushed aggressively for that to happen sooner rather than later. And I believe this particular section of their financial report is the key why they're pushing so hard to get that done. The increase in IDWP revenue resulted from increased sales of backlisted comics and books through Amazon and other non-direct market channels. So in other words, the big money they got was from the Lock and Key show on Netflix. Second to that was basically back issues or other forms of books that are not through direct market, which is the traditional monthly floppy comics. And then we move on to this third piece here, which is the increase in IDWP revenue resulted from increased sales of backlisted comics and books through Amazon and other non-direct market channels, digital offerings, and games, partially offset by a decrease in direct market sales. The decrease in CTM revenues reflects the pandemic-related closing of many clients, including Broadway shows, and CTM suspension of operations in March. So that they're sort of indirectly, they're using business financial speak, but basically they're talking about that since they had to go pencils down on a lot of things, they couldn't sell comics. So the only thing that really kept them afloat was the Lock and Key show and selling stuff through Amazon, which are primarily sort of the young adult graphic novel type stuff and all the little things that go along with that. Loss from operations. IDW's consolidated loss from operations narrowed substantially on the receipt of high margin revenue. So in other words, Lock and Key, again, is keeping them afloat just from running the business. And at IDWP on increased demand for backlisted titles. In other words, IDWP, which is their publishing arm, which makes comics, they were kept afloat by increased demand for the old stuff, things that people were like getting that had been made 1, 2, 5, 10 years ago. There, one example here is the Beauty of Horror coloring book line. So in other words, comics aren't making them any money. They're heavily reliant on Netflix deals in this case through Lock and Key, and also basically books through other channels, but nothing to do with comics. And you might ask, does that reflect in their current comic line? Are they doing better now than when they were for the majority of the early days of the lockdown? Well, if you look at their new releases, and that's out this week, and this is as of the recording of this video, you have From Hell, which is the Master Edition, which is basically a reprint of an old story about Jack the Ripper. You have G.I. Joe, Star Trek, Turtles, Haunt This Journal, which is that Beauty of Horror book that they mentioned, and a Transformers Terminator crossover. That's only 6 titles out this week, which far outweighs last week. So it seems like their title list is getting smaller and smaller by the week if you just kind of do a quick scroll through. So what does that mean? That means IDW is basically staying afloat because of Netflix deals and people ordering older books and older stuff. That's the end of it. So what does this mean from a hiring perspective? Well, are they hiring people that are going to increase their comics line? The answer is, for the large part, no. So if we look at Blake Kobashigawa, pardon me, let's take a look at his experience as IDW P's, and that's the publishing arm, that P's for publishing, new vice president of sales. Kobashigawa will be responsible for developing the company's sales strategy, initiatives, campaigns, overall business objectives across all markets. He spent some time at DC, working in various capacities, including the direct-to-consumer market. And at DC Comics, he spearheaded the Essential Graphic Novels program and led his international book and mass market initiatives. Again, less to do with comics, the monthly floppy comic market, and more about graphic novels, sales initiatives, essential graphic novels, that sort of thing. Let's see. Okay. Then we're talking, and if we go back a little bit, and let's talk about Joseph Hughes, who's promoted Director of Creative Affairs for IDW Entertainment. Remember that IDW Entertainment is sort of the umbrella branch, but it's more focused on non-comic entertainment outside of just what we're doing with the property. Hughes moves up from an editorial role with IDWP, so he's coming out of that publishing arm and just into the broader entertainment space. He will be responsible for working across the business, develop a strategy, and hone creative for IDW's translation of its extensive IP library into TV, film, podcasts, and digital media. There's that emphasis. There's that focus. He will manage creator talent for all IDWE projects, identity, and recruit creators to pitch new comics for publishing consideration, and work with the creative affairs and development to identify and curate titles to pitch to external talent. So what does that mean? That means he's focused on taking their existing licensed properties and translating them into film, TV, and other kinds of entertainment media, not comics. Then he's looking at bringing in new talent for comics, but with the idea of to identify and curate titles to pitch to external talent. So the idea is to find new comics that they can bring in and license for the express intent of spreading them out, branching them out into other entertainment media. So here we're seeing a de-emphasis on making comics and more of an emphasis of finding comics that sort of resonate and then expanding them outward into other areas. And then last, definitely not least, is Marissa Stoddard, elevated to Manager of Creative Affairs. So Stoddard moves from Senior Coordinator to Manager of Creative Affairs, IDWE. Again, that's the entertainment branch. She will support the translation of library titles with media rights into their optimal and series format, including TV, film, podcasts, and other digital media. Again, focus is taking the properties and pushing them out. No focus, very little focus, or no focus on creating comics, but taking the properties and putting them into other media formats. Well, we're thrilled that Marissa will expand her role at IDW to bring more titles from our rich library to the screen and highlight new stories and voices. Before joining the IDW team, Stoddard was coordinator of scripted television for Condé Nast Entertainment. She started her career producing and directing the documentary She Makes Comics. Now, I used to work at Condé Nast for several years, and I was there when Condé Nast, or C&E, was formed. And I can tell you from firsthand personal experience, there was a high degree of focus on Condé Nast Entertainment. Was all about video, where Condé Nast Entertainment primarily and at its heart and its core is a magazine publishing company. They formed that branch specifically to focus on video entertainment. So what you see three high profile sales and development personnel that are coming into the executive, or coming into their fore, as it were, for IDW. Again, emphasizing the fact that if you look at their financial reports from this past June, IDW is taking heavy losses, except for translating one of their IPs, Lock and Key, into Netflix, and also selling basically back issues and stuff on Amazon, and probably, they don't mention here, but probably Scholastic and a few other channels. No emphasis on monthly comics. And you say, well, why do I keep banging that drum? Why do they keep banging that drum? Why? Because there's also been talk lately, especially with the recent 1/3 of their personnel layoffs with DC Comics, about potentially just the companies like AT&T, Time Warner, and or Disney through Marvel, stop doing the publishing stuff and just taking those properties and farming them out to a company that will do the comic publishing piece of it, while the main company like Marvel or DC holds on to the licensing rights. IDW is one of those companies that keeps getting thrown out there as one of the companies that would do that because they are so good at licensing. But what we're seeing here is that's probably not going to be the case. If they do license the stuff or acquire the license from either Marvel or DC, their entire focus is on licensing stuff out to make media out of it. Marvel and DC are already doing that through their respective parent companies, either Time Warner Media or Disney with Marvel. So what you're seeing here is over and over again, IDW is just trying to hold on to what that they got and then start to make money through other media that's not comics. So the probability that Marvel and or DC would farm that out to IDW is probably not going to happen. So if that move does happen through DC and Marvel, it's probably going to be somebody else like Boom or Dynamite might be an option, or some other company that is very good at licensing. But the more and more these moves keep coming up in the news, the less and less likely it seems that IDW would be a valid target for doing something like that. So that's just the information I saw from today. Hopefully this has been informational and been interesting. Let me know what you're thinking down in the comment section below. Does this seem like IDW is making the right moves? Are they doing the best they can with the titles what they've got? I mean, they definitely seem to be moving away from comics. Do you think that's the right move, or do you think, or they should really focus on doing what they do best with comics? If you really consider what they do to be the best that they can do with comics, or are they reliant too heavily on getting that Netflix deal, as they point out in their financial reports? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. And if you think I'm off my rocker, please give me that thumbs down and tell me in the comment section why you think that's the case. And as always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Comical Opinions newsletter. I put out a more in-depth article on a weekly basis. It's completely free. And if you subscribe, you'll be eligible for some benefits that I'm working on for the near future, but you can only get those if you subscribe. So thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate everybody who takes the time to watch this video. And this is Gabe Hernandez for Comical Opinions. You have a great day.